Sports team relocations are sadly not uncommon in the United States. Just in the past decade or so, we've had the Oakland Raiders, St. Louis Rams, and San Diego Chargers all pack up shop and skip town, leaving bitter fan bases in their wake. Then there were the Montreal Expos, Seattle Supersonics, Hartford Whalers, and Brooklyn Dodgers, among many, many others, who, for reasons legitimate for the Dodgers, or spurious for mostly everyone else, left their original hometowns for supposedly greener pastures, destroying the hopes and dreams of many who they left behind. Now, the Oakland Athletics seem likely to rejoin this disreputable group. The A's themselves are no strangers to relocation. Founded in 1901 as the Philadelphia Athletics, they were a baseball powerhouse in the nascent years of the sport, but infighting between the owners, bad business decisions, and the growth of the in-city competitor Philadelphia Phillies tanked the team, and the A's were eventually sold to Chicago businessman Arnold Johnson, who immediately moved the team to Kansas City in search of greater profits. After Johnson died, the team came under the control of insurance salesman Charlie Finley, who was more circus showman than baseball savant. He changed their colors from red and blue to green and gold, and then he changed their hometown from Kansas City to Oakland, despite prior statements of his intentions to keep the A's in Kansas City permanently. Fast forward to 2023. The Coliseum is falling apart, the team is bad, and the current owner, John Fisher, is looking to have the team skip town. Again. It's not like there weren't options to keep the team in Oakland. The A's and the city of Oakland had been working for years on building a new waterfront stadium at Howard Terminal in the Port of Oakland. According to the city, the $12 billion stadium would have been privately financed, with only several $100 million of public money spent on public infrastructure upgrades. But the pandemic slowed down the negotiations between the team and the city quite a bit, so much so that in 2021, Major League Baseball allowed the A's to explore relocation. From there, the Las Vegas deal rather quickly came together, with the Nevada legislature approving public funding for the stadium rather ironically on the same day that A's fans packed the Coliseum for their reverse boycott protest. And with the city of Oakland seizing negotiations on their end, the move to Las Vegas seems inevitable. I'm not going to pretend to understand anything about the financial and legal machinations behind the decision to relocate the team, but the whole thing is just a really bad look for the A's and MLB in general. The team has a history of success in the Bay Area, and as the reverse boycott showed, the A's still have plenty of fans who want to support the team and are about to be royally screwed over. It's not their fault that Fisher has run the team with what amounts to a shoestring budget relative to the rest of baseball for practically his entire ownership, and has let go or traded away multiple fan favorites and decent to good players, all to create the narrative that the A's would be more profitable elsewhere. I have no sympathy for the billionaire owner of a team that receives over $100 million in revenue sharing from other teams, according to DodgerBlue.com, and only invests $33.7 million in player salaries. What strikes me, though, is the similarity of the A's situation to the one that the Columbus Crew of Major League Soccer found themselves in just a few short years ago. In October 2017, the Columbus Crew had the oldest purpose-built soccer stadium in MLS, and their owner, Anthony Precourt, was looking for a new stadium. He threatened to take the team to Austin if the city of Columbus would not give him a new stadium downtown. Immediately, fan protests erupted, and both sides accused each other of negotiating in bad faith. The disputes and protests lasted for over a year until MLS came to an agreement. Precourt would sell the Crew to a new ownership group that would keep the Crew in Columbus and would subsequently be awarded a new franchise in Austin. Thus, the Crew stayed in Columbus and got a shiny new stadium, Austin FC was created, and everyone came out winners. There are two major differences in their situations, however. The first is that both the Crew and the league got major pushback, not just from Crew fans, but fans of the rest of the league. Save the Crew signs were seen wherever the Crew traveled, as fans around the country showed their support for the league's very first franchise. This universal support probably played a role in the crew ultimately being sold and remaining in Columbus. On the other hand, A's fans seem to be going it alone. While there looks to be some support online, and it really depends on which social media app you're on, the baseball subreddit is overwhelmingly in support of the protests, while Facebook appears to be full of victim blaming and outright mocking of the situation. Opposing fans in stadium seem to be more excited about being able to beat up on a bad team than showing solidarity. And although opposing broadcasts do show the protest sign at the Coliseum, it seems that commentators and team managers have been told not to directly address the protests and only give vague statements of sympathy and understanding. The second is that the Crew are an MLS franchise and the A's are an MLB franchise. The Crew today are worth $550 million. The A's, as bad as they are still worth $1.18 billion. When Precourt sold the Crew in 2019, he reportedly sold them for $150 million. It would take much, much more than that to pry the A's away from Fisher, if he is even willing to sell. And even if he is, who would be able to pay the asking price? There's a reason many sports teams that have been sold in the last 10 to 20 years or so are owned by ownership groups rather than by a single person, unless that person is Steve Cohen. The Crew were saved because the asking price wasn't so high to begin with, and because MLS was looking to place a team in Austin anyway. MLB has explicitly stated that no new expansion team will join the league until both the A's and the Tampa Bay Rays get new stadiums, which would seem to preclude this kind of solution, which, ironically, was how the Kansas City Royals came into existence after the A's bolted for Oakland in the first place. And that whole thing about being a bad look for the A's and MLB in general? Owners of sports teams are more than willing to deal with negative optics as long as they get their shiny new toy. Look at how Stan Kroenke burned every bridge possible when the Rams left St. Louis, and then was rewarded by the NFL with a Super Bowl in his new stadium, which his team won. Or how the Chargers left San Diego years before the stadium where they would be a tenant to the Rams was completed, forcing them to play at a smaller MLS stadium for a few years. The A's look to be on track to do both, as their lease at the Coliseum expires before the expected completion date of their new stadium, and there is no suitable MLB venue in Las Vegas. So it's pretty clear then that the Crew being saved was the exception rather than the rule. It was a perfect storm of intense league-wide negative press, MLS teams still not being valued too highly at the time, and the desire to expand the league regardless that resulted in the Crew staying in Columbus. But does that mean the A's are doomed to leave? Well, as they say that games are not played on paper, so too that nothing is certain unless and until papers are signed. But at this point, it's looking like it's going to take a minor miracle in the form of an obscenely rich outside investor, which seems unlikely, or some kind of major backtrack by Fisher to keep the A's in Oakland. So as sad and infuriating as it is, I'm not going to hold my breath. Oh, and just in case you thought it would stop with the A's, Brewers fans, you might be on deck.